All right, and what is up, Celestia Radio? This is DJ Shamrock live tonight. It is 8:30 Central Daylight Time, and we are coming to you with a special live broadcast this evening. I have a fantastic interview scheduled for tonight. We had an awesome one with Daniel Ingram last night, and had a lot of fun with that with Brony Hour. We were happy to simulcast that. We'll have that up on our YouTube in the next day or so, I imagine. So we're going to try and do that, and of course Celestia Radio being our YouTube channel. And so please come join the stream, come and join the IRC channel. Easy way to get onto that is to go to ponify.me/chat, or if you have any IRC client, just go on over to CantorNet server. I believe it's cantornet.org, and join Celestia Radio, that specific channel, and you can come chat with us, give us questions for the interviewee, that being the illustrious Sleepless Brony that I have with me tonight. He is the writer of such famed writings as the Romance Reports, and other such stories that I don't have sitting right in front of me, but that's the one that I've read. So, hello, Sleepless. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. And you guys may hear QCOM in the background as well. He's the one actually doing the broadcasting. Doing the broadcast and recording for me today. It's being recorded, so have no fear. Those of you that are followers of Romance Reports and other stories that Sleep has done, we'll have a recording of this up on YouTube this week as well. So look forward to having that. So we have you on here now. For those of the audience that do not know who you are and what you've done, can you give just sort of a brief bio and any other personal information that you feel so privileged as to give out?
Oh boy, privileged. I don't know, man. I'm still reeling a little from being mentioned anywhere near the same capacity as Daniel Ingram over here. But I'm going to try to work through that. Basically, I'm a fan fiction writer. Been writing My Little Pony fan fiction for about a year now, actually. It's kind of surprising to think that through. My biggest story, I suppose, is Romance Reports. That's definitely the most popular by a wide margin. If you haven't heard of them, then you're probably not into clop fiction. Just going to rip that Band-Aid off real quick right now, because I think almost all of my stories involve that in some form or another. As for bio stuff, I live in the United States. I am a college graduate working a full-time job. That's about as much as I like passing out.
All right. Well, while we're on the subject of clop fiction, now we pride ourselves here at Celestia Radio in taking on pretty much anyone and everyone that no other station will take on in terms of interviews. We've had Hot Diggity Demon, we've had Sergeant Sprinkles, We've
had Raging Semi as well. If you look at any other clop
really
artist, yes,
I'm not the first then.
Okay. He was the first guy I interviewed, and
ever,
and yeah, I'm so novice at it. Even though technically it was just more. I gave him questions through email, and he gave me his audio responses, and then I just put myself asking him the questions, and that was the interview.
So bro. Did we have Mega Suite at one time? Somebody had Mega Suite.
Yeah, we did. I need to go back into my SoundCloud and pull all those off my SoundCloud and put them on our YouTube. Now that I'm no longer afraid of stuff.
I'm never afraid. I don't afraid of anything. But
okay.
Yeah, so we've had quite the cast, and I think other than Derpy Hooves News, they tend to also try and write reviews and stuff on the most colorful of individuals and content. Thanks to Ginded for doing that. But yeah, so we pride ourselves in that. And so while on the subject of that, to be honest, I've read all of colorful stuff. I've read all of Romance Reports, and as you know, it was my first pony fan fiction that I read, and I attributed it in part sort of negatively to getting me into reading pony fan fiction because it did take up a significant portion of my time. But
it's not a short story.
It's not, and it's led
somehow.
It's led me to other things as well. Like I don't know if you're familiar with what's it called now? It's called The Immortal Game now. It used to be called Ponies Make War.
I've heard of it. I've heard of Ponies Make War. I didn't know it had gone through a title change. I haven't read it though.
It was a good title change. And it's listed as grimdark, but to be honest, it's mainly action. Yeah, and that story is well over 600 pages, and it's not even done yet.
Wow.
Yeah, and so definitely a lot of consuming of my time that your story has led me down the road of. But while we're on the topic of actual cloud fiction and your story, reading it, you know, I'm amazed with your ability to write the characters as true to the show, as true to the actual writers that are on the show, that even though you have those portions that are in there that's Klopp stuff, it reads like just a sort of a mellow
X-rated episode.
It reads like a mellow ship fic. You don't really think about those parts of it because it's not a lemon sort of a story. It's not a one shot. It's not this in-depth only focused on that sort of thing, even though the story is romance reports and the focus is, you know, Twilight trying to find out what love is and that sort of thing. But
Insert
it really
what is love song here.
What is love? But it, you know, to me, I didn't even think when I was describing it to some other people who asked me, they said, well, what is romance reports? I didn't even think to say plot fic. I just said, oh, well, it's a ship fic because it's, you know, it doesn't come across that way as when most people would imagine a clop fic.
That's funny because I've gotten a lot of messages and some comments to the effect of, well, my friend told me so much about this, and I started to read it, and then they had sex, and oh no.
Well, you know, people are always going to be bothered by that. But somebody that's on the middle line, that's like, you know, I'm not really into reading that sort of thing specifically. Like, this is a great fanfic for you because if you're okay with that content, but you don't go seeking it out, it's a great story because you won't be bothered by it. You will not be bothered by it.
Actually, now that I think about it, because I do keep tabs on. I go to this. Sham, you know of the Klopfic directory, don't you?
The Klopfic directory.
Yeah. Here.
No, I'm familiar with the what's it called? The archive, the explicit archive, which is where Romance Reports was when I first started reading it, before you put it on FimFiction. Yeah.
Well, this is sort of an aggregator type of site that has it gets all this pretty much any kind of Klopfic from any site and just sort of puts it on here. And this is where I learned about Romance Reports. Now that I'm thinking about it, I did start to read this a little bit, but then I saw how long it was. 22 chapters. That's a bit long for me to read.
Is it still? That might have been before you actually continue to add on the alternate ending, is it?
It's up to. I'm gonna have to double check real quick. It is actually up to. It is finally done. Yeah, the alternate ending was finished a few weeks ago. It's up to. Oh, look, FimFiction doesn't list numbers of chapters. Around 22. Somewhere around 22.
Something like that, because I think the alternate is like two or three chapters when it's all said and done, something like that. And so I guess I just you know, while I get my thoughts back, and we're on that topic. Did you set out to accomplish sort of as I've described, or did you have another tilt on it that you wanted to put on the story? Did you want to make it more of a Klopfic? Did you want to make it more of just sort of this really down to earth, show-based story that is only not part of the show because it's, X-rated essentially?
Definitely the second one. I talked about this in, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Pony Fiction Vault, but I did a written review over there where I talked about this basically, was that I was actually on the fence myself for a long time when I first started writing it, whether to include the sex at all. That wasn't a thing that I made up my mind to do until I basically got to that part. The part where any normal person would, fade the scene to black, and then moving on, next, what happened after, and I sort of, waffled back and forth on that for a long time. And the point of the story is a character, discovering romance and learning about this kind of relationship, and wading into that kind of thing for the first time. And that, to me, sex is a huge part of that. Emotionally, it's a very intimate thing, and it seemed to me that it would be such a part of the story that to leave it out, I think it would have really, it really would have detracted from the experience, being there with the character, learning things. I mean, I tried very hard to have the sex scenes be meaningful in a lot of ways, that, the character interactions, having differences in the scene based on who is there and what kind of relationship the characters involved have with each other. I thought that was important. So I eventually ended up, including that. And I mean, maybe after all said and done, that's just justification, and I'm some kind of crazy pervert. But it's not like I would really know, honestly. So.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, it's funny because I'm comparing romance reports to reading Semi's Equestrian Renaissance fic.
See, I haven't actually read that. I've heard some things, but
yeah, it's also really good. It's also really long too. I was talking to him as he was developing that, and it's pretty entertaining. Although it's not.
Well, it's much more serious.
Yeah. That's another thing. Yours is much more.
Much different.
Like you said, it more completes with the
compliments.
There it is. Compliments the show.
Right.
And this one's a little bit more darker.
Yeah, and that was the thing, that I found interesting, because it essentially, and I mean this with the utmost respect, you ruined every other fanfic for me that I could possibly ever read, because
I said that in one of your comments, actually.
I did. I said, look, I love this story, but I can't read anything else, other than things that are so take such a different take on the show, such as The Immortal Game, which is full-on combat war sort of stuff. So it's like Fallout Equestria. It's totally different take on the show. But I can't read anything that's realistic to the show, because I haven't found anyone that's been able to write the characters themselves. Forget the situations they're in. The characters themselves in the dialogue and their actions and their reactions, as well as romance reports. And it's, I haven't read any of your other stuff, but I assume if you are writing the same way, that it will be just as good, if not better. My only thing is that when I read from different authors and stuff, it's a dilemma as a reader that I have, because when I read a particular author, I say, okay, one story, and if anything else deviates from that they've written, I can't do it, because I've committed to that one particular fanon idea, from that author. So do you have anything in relation to romance reports that follows the same storyline, or is everything else totally different?
Well, when I'm done going like, "Ah, shucks," over here. Well, I've been,
Battery's fun.
yeah, I have a couple different stories. I mean, I've done a few experiments with different styles, different tones. They're not all just like romance reports. I'm actually in progress of writing sort of a sequel to romance reports, which is called Up in the Clouds, Down to Earth, which is I just barely started. It's actually I was writing it. I was working on it about a half hour ago, but that's a very similar kind of love story, focusing on Fluttershy, and that's coming soon. A lot of the other stories I've written are shorter. This is the only other long one I started working on, but I've got more. Let me see. Looking at the list of stuff I've written, actually, I got a short prequel to romance reports called Need, which is I think is really good, but it's a much different tone. You probably wouldn't like it. It's very, very dark and sad. I did kind of a comedy short called Getting to Know Him. I did sort of a more traditional classical romance called Like Fine Wine. I mean, I hope that I continued my read on the characters in each of those, but I was trying to branch out and do different things with each one. Romance Reports is a very, very classic 3-act kind of character structure, a very, very straightforward plot in a lot of ways. It's got, I know at its heart it is a romance story, but it's got kind of a hero's journey thing. I know this probably sounds extraordinarily pretentious, but at its heart it is basically a character going through trials and learning things about themselves and the world and coming out better for that.
Well, it sounds like a good read. And I would definitely recommend pretty much anything you've done, given that Romance Reports is well and enough. Proof positive. But on the I'm trying to think, what was that other one that I saw that's up on your FimFiction? Is it?
I don't know.
Pony? Is it Ponyville University?
Yes, Ponyville University.
And that's based. And now tell me that's based on a Mega Suite drawing, right? Which one is it?
It's a it was a commission for him actually. I don't know who commissioned it, but it was the one where it's a human Rainbow Dash in Twilight in a locker room, and Twilight is snapping Rainbow Dash in the ass with a toilet towel. What did she say?
Whoop, you don't like humanized. Sorry, Sham.
Yeah.
It's okay. I forgive him for that.
I always said I wouldn't do it humanized, but it's just I saw that pic and I had the idea. This was just something I kind of dashed off.
Mega Suite has that effect on people.
I know he's a good dude. He really is.
Anything he draws, people are just mesmerized to.
Especially Futashay.
Yes. Oh, this is Celestia Radio, people. We are not afraid.
I'm not afraid of anything.
Oh, come on. Futashay is a touchstone for the fandom. Everyone knows Futashay.
Right? Everybody knows that.
And what's funny is... Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I don't mean to.
Oh, it's okay. Go for it.
What's funny is now she's sort of becoming, at least in the art and the animation world, she's becoming sort of just a regular person now. Futashay is just because she's just all over the place. She's just
everybody knows who it is. There's music. Yeah. There's music that's been done. Like what's one of my favorite songs, and it's so funny because a lot of people don't like this song. But Derpy Grooves' "I Need That."
Yeah.
That he did for Remix War 4, I think.
I still can't believe he made that.
I don't remember, but
so funny.
Yeah, it's so catchy, and it talks about scoot abuse and Futashay and all kinds of other crazy things. But yeah, so it's pretty integral, I think. And one of the other things that I hope becomes that way is I must say, and I don't want to spoil anything for people, so I'm just gonna start yelling spoilers in regards to Romance Reports, because we are gonna get into stuff that's gonna be spoiler material. Nothing too intricate, but I must say, and by the end of the night you're gonna be like, why do you keep flattering me? It's just because I love this story so much. And the whole thing, Twilight and Shirley, for the main storyline, end up becoming a thing. That's all people need to know.
Spoiler alert. Whoa.
Spoiler alert. And to be completely honest, I wasn't, again, first pony fan fiction, so I didn't really have in my head any sort of like shipping ideas or anything like that, because I let writers do that for me. I'm not the kind of person that does that myself, and except for Twidash. And
I was gonna say, please, come on, you must have.
Yes.
You must have one. Everyone has
one. The one. And so I was reading it at first. I was reading, and you have Twiluna at the very beginning, and it's not really actually developed that much, but it's hit on. It's like, oh, there could be Twiluna, and then people are like, yay, or whatever, and she ends up.
It's the dangling carrot. Just
she ends up coming off as kind of a bitch, Luna in the story. I think
strong word right there.
I think other people would agree with me. I could use other words. I could use other 4-letter words, but and you're reading and to be completely fair, before this, us being at Celestia Radio, I was never like a huge Luna fan, and I knew a lot of people are. There are people in our chat in Celestia Radio. There are people dedicated to New Lunar Republic, and I never got it before. And I was just like, well, whatever, she's a character. And so reading your story actually helped me continue to dislike her.
Oh.
And
that was far from my intent.
Yes, but I must say, though, that that Aesthetic B with the Immortal game did a pretty good job of counteracting that as well, because I have come to this sort of idea of liking her character more, because she plays a very integral role in that story, combat-wise and otherwise as well. And, the story really points her out as sort of the black sheep sort of character, and so that's it makes you feel a little more sympathetic. But then I went back to Romance Reports after you did the alternate ending. I was like, oh yeah, she's a bitch, I forgot. And but so Twilight and Cheerly, a combo that I've never thought of before, and I gotta say, you caught me completely off guard, because you hint at it several times in the story. Cheerly comes up and says, oh, hi Twilight, how are you doing? Or whatever. Twilight's, and I think
I'm
it's
totally not hitting on you nervously.
Lol. Yeah, exactly. And I think you hint at it more obviously the closer it gets to that point. But yeah, like the part where a spoiler alert. This whole thing is spoilers for people listening, so just beware. The part where Twilight is confronted by Applejack about the whole Brayburn thing. Yeah. And she's pissed. And, everybody ends up crying or pissed and leaving the bar scene or whatever.
We've all had those nights.
Right. And Shirley comes up, and she's so comforting to Twilight, and she's basically the only one that's there. And that's the moment in my head that I was like, oh shit. I was like, it's Shirley. Like it's always been Shirley. It's always been her. It's never been Luna. And so you're like, oh man. And then you just sit there and start thinking about it, and you're like, you know what? That makes sense. It makes sense. Because at first you're kind of like, wow, what? That was out of left field. And then you're like, oh, no, I'm okay with this. Like, because Shirley's into the, she's a teacher, for God's sake. Teachers and librarians, they go hand in hand.
Well, not even getting into, whatever you could say about Twilight and, her teacher, Celestia. It's, there's precedent there for Twilight liking teachers, that's all.
Twilight is to Cheerly as Lauren is to us.
Oh.
Good night. Good night. Not fast. I said I said Cheerilee is to Twilight as Lauren Goodnight is to us.
Oh, that's true. I suppose I can see that. Lauren would make a good Cheerilee.
Yes, she is Cheerilee.
Also, something that I didn't think about before, and I don't know if you had thought about this, Sleepless, but spoiler again. His alternate ending has Twilestia shipping, and I don't know if you intended this.
Yay!
But I started thinking about it, and the gears started rolling in my head, and I went, you know what? Both of those people that you're shipping Twi with have the same voice actress.
Absolutely was on my mind. Yeah. No, I know.
Absolutely. Yes? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
It's a long-standing, the Twilestia it's a pretty obvious ship. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but her, complete adoration of the princess is heartwarming and hilarious, or, any way you want to take it. But that was one of the things I had in mind when, thinking, well, when I was writing the story, I was looking for, obviously in the end, Twilight is going to end up with somebody. It was sort of a thing I wanted to do, something different. I wanted to not be one of her friends, not be one of the main six, kind of shake things up there a little. And, one reason I chose to write her as homosexual was, honestly, it's just that there weren't that many male characters. I didn't want to do an OC of any kind. I didn't want to.
Thank you.
It's for a lot of reasons, but. So when with those conditions in place, you're looking down the list, and you're like, well, how many other characters are there really? And Cheerilee ended up being, to me, an obvious choice. I mean, she hasn't, especially at that time, she hadn't been characterized very much in the show. But basically all we knew about her was, she's a teacher, she loves kids. Her story about her cutie mark, that's, she's a good teacher, she's nice, that's about it. But from that, I kind of straight out and did my own thing with it. And I think that ended up working to some degree.
Yes, and people should note this is prior to season 2.
Right.
So
this was way back. So.
This is way back. This is prior. So no information about Cheerilee was gleaned from season 2.
And she has been showing up more.
She has, and I've been happy about it because I did read this prior to season 2. Well, most of it prior to season 2. And it got me thinking about, I actually liked her character more. Like, you really put her out there as a character that I could really call, like, probably one of my favorite background characters now, because I'm like, if she had more airtime, like I can imagine that this would be what she would be like, and that she would be a great addition, to the show, and having her on more, and she has been.
Yeah, no, at first I was kind of, the cynical way to say it was just, getting her more in the audience awareness in preparation for the Hearts and Hose Day episode. But aside from that, yeah, it has been cool to be including more characters. Not deviating from the main cast too much, but it's they've been doing that in a lot of ways, to kind of branching out, getting wider a little.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was another thing that that I think the story does well, is that there is this what do I want to call it, like an equilibrium within the main six. There are points in time where I'm thinking in the story, I'm like, there isn't really much Pinkie Pie, or there isn't much Fluttershy yet, because they're you don't have them as involved with Twilight. You have Rarity and Rainbow Dash are both pretty
heavily
important to Twilight's development, and then of course there's
important.
And then there's Applejack, who is sort of like a coincides with the Brayburn incident,
People have called her an antagonist, which I thought was funny.
It's interesting. I would almost say, I don't know. It's, I could see why people would say that, but she's definitely not the main antagonist. She's,
of course not. The antagonist is Twilight herself, clearly.
I think, in fact that Applejack is sort of
voice of reason.
She's the reason I'm not comfortable calling her an antagonist is because she's sort of this force that is opposed to sort of the antagonist standpoint, or one of the antagonists. You could say Luna being
right.
one. And Applejack is basically saying, hey, tell Luna to fuck off, because she's being a bitch and you should not listen to her because she's just trying to mess with you. Because Applejack is one of those characters that, and we saw it in Luna Eclipsed as well. She's one of the characters, as honest as she is, she's still that sort of, she's that character that is defined by sort of the white, more southern sort of America that's a little more close-minded, not too much, but enough that she's the last person probably to accept that Luna has changed. And so she's the perfect character to be questioning it and being cynical about the whole situation.
I honestly didn't
Whether that was
thought of it as much as her as Applejack in opposition to Luna, so much as just in opposition to not opposition really, but I mean her own concept of how love and relationships work is just vastly at odds with what was being suggested in Twilight. And as you say, just as an honest character, she can't help but have her opinion on her sleeve in that.
Right.
There's no way she can just smile and say, no, it's gonna go fine. Yeah, I mean, your friends probably work out okay. I'll support you. She's, hey, I disagree. I think this is wrong. I mean, I'm still your friend, but wow.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I have seen a lot of stories that that do that. Reading enough Twilight Dash stuff, you do get into there's a large amount of Applejack material that goes along with that. That people will use because, I mean, for one, she's one of Rainbow Dash's best friends, and in those contexts, you see two completely different takes on Applejack. One of being the completely, oh, I'm your best friend, I'm so happy for you, and the other being like, the little more reluctant, like, I don't know, I don't think that doesn't sound right, that's not what I was taught, kind of a thing.
Conservative.
Right. And definitely. So, getting into the let's see, we talked about Cheerly. I do kind of want to know, because reading through the beginning, and spoilers by the way, reading
just ruin the whole story for him.
I am going to. We're doing this.
No, they won't have to read it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, you don't have to read it now.
We'll save you about 180,000 words.
Good.
We'll just do a radio play on this in 10 seconds flat, and then we'll get it out.
Oh boy.
I would do that in a heartbeat.
So, at the beginning, so you're kind of like, okay, Luna, whatever, and then it's almost immediately discarded. Well, not discarded, but forgotten, because then Twilight is focusing on, okay, in order to get to Luna, now I have to do this other stuff. And
right, it's not forgotten. It's the driving framework. It's the
right. It is, but it's funny because being such a central focus, you forget, you get lost in the story. You forget about the fact that, oh wait, she's supposed to be going after Luna, because when it gets to that point in the story where Twilight is confronted by Luna the second time, when she like fully crushes her soul, basically.
You're talking about the end of Act 2 low point, not when she comes back in Act 3, right?
Yes, I believe so. It's the one where Twilight's like, yay, now I'm ready to be with you, and Luna, or no.
Luna's like, no.
Yeah, and Twilight's like, what the fuck? But so yeah, there's a significant portion of like Act 1 and Act 2 where you're kind of like, you're sort of aware that it's there, that she's going after Luna, but you really don't think about it because you're so involved with Twilight and her focus on like doing these because she's such a task monger that
lists,
she goes,
checklists.
Yes, she goes, she sets goals and she does all these things, and so long term wise, you lose track of it because she's like, I got to do this and then this and then this and then this.
Well, things get complicated too. It's never straight.
Very, yes, things get very. I'm streamlining it, so you start to see her go to these different characters, and then when you start to get into this conflict that she's having with Luna, and you start to see Celestia showing up, at that point, myself and I'm hoping other people are going, wait a minute, is she gonna go for Celestia? Because there is so much like hint dropping, at least during the Celestia parts, where you're like, Celestia's being way too buddy right now. Like this needs to happen, And,
well, it did.
And in the alternate ending, but before that, you're thinking about it, and then all of a sudden, cheerily, and then you're like, because it was more of just this sort of, I didn't know how to feel about it, because at first you're like, oh crap, she's not going to be with Celestia now, but then you're like, oh, surely this could work out okay. So my question is, because I do have one, my question is, what did you originally intend for that storyline to be? Because I've heard you say in comments, I'm almost thinking that alternate ending's the real one, but which one had you originally thought out when you were writing the Celestia parts in the beginning of the story? Did you want her to end up with her, or did you change your mind, or what happened?
Well, the original ending is my preferred one. That was what I set out to write. Just for the record, gonna put that down right now. That is what I set out to do, and that to me is the canon ending. I suppose is the only appropriate word for it. Although that's hilarious in retrospect. It was meant to be a Twilight and Cheerleader story. And if the way you see Twilight's relationship to Celestia really will change how you see those elements in the story. I mean, if you ship them, and I do too on every other day. It's if you support that and think that's the way to go, then yeah, definitely that element's in there. And it's kind of sad when you look at the original ending. But if you only see them as mentor and student, just having a very close relationship that's not necessarily romantic, or maybe romantic feelings could be construed as awkward in that case. Celestia raised Twilight. I mean, there's all kinds of potential for weirdness in there. In that case, Twilight ending up with Cheerly is perfectly normal. I don't think you would really miss that much, but yeah, I mean, the hints are there. I mean, you can't resist throwing in the hints. It's just Twilight's adoration of the princess of the show is just so obvious. It's so ridiculously over the top at times. It's fun to throw it in there, which, is why I ended up doing the alt ending. A lot of people left comments to that effect, like, oh man, I absolutely thought this was going to become Twilestia, and you switched at the last second. And I was like, yeah, no, I know, it could have gone that way. I see it. I mean, I don't like to think of myself as a shipper in the way that like people get rabid about it. Like this is the couple, this is the two characters that need to be together and they don't work any other way. Like, nah, this is all extraneous from the show. We're just playing around with ideas. I could see Twilight ending up happily with Cheerily, Celestia, Rainbow Dash, Rarity, a variety of different characters, and I don't see them as fundamentally conflicting. I could write a half dozen stories focusing on different pairings with the same character being paired on each time, and not have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, hitting on a few things that you said. One thing, and I will say to the effect that I agree that I don't think there's any like true pairings, any true shippings.
True pairing, as they say.
Right, and but the thing that got me, and it has nothing really honestly to do with who's paired with who, or if there's more than one pair. It's the fact that there was an alternate ending, and like if you had written a different story that was like Twilestia, I would have been like, okay, this is cool, and then the other is cool, but it's in the same. It's like
right in the same universe, basically.
It's two heads to the same coin. And so you're kind of left with this conflict of shit. What's the real like in this particular small mini universe of a story? What is the real sort of thing? And so hearing you say the Cheerily one, I mean, it makes sense to me.
No, I know. I'm sure plenty of people out there right now are going, "Oh, you're kidding."
Because and I'll say this, I wish that this is what I wish. I'm glad for the Cheerily stuff. It made me appreciate her character way more. It made me realize that a shipping that I don't think happens very often, being twice.
It's strangely absent in the fandom. I don't see.
Yeah, yeah. In reading your story, I'm like, why isn't there more of this? But the thing that gets me is, I'm a sucker. I am a sucker for sad stories, and so reading the alternate ending is like, crush my soul, because
again and again and again.
There's this whole thing where she's already had. It's like reading the regular ending, and then going, you know what, fuck you, and then and then Celestia, and it sort of is just like, man, what just happened to me? And I understand that it goes along with your idea of the story being that love and the journey of finding who you're meant to be with and all that stuff sucks, and and it can be difficult, and even at its best there are really, really terrible things that happen, and it's realistic. It's good. I like that about it. But I still, the fanboy inside of me goes, I really wish that there was an ending where she totally skips Cheerily completely,
just goes straight to Celestia.
Gets pissed at Luna when that whole thing happens, and goes straight to Celestia, like right after that. And I would think, I have no idea if you have any interest in this, but I think that would be very interesting to see what that story would end up like. It would probably end up very similar to the regular alternate ending, but a lot less sad face from the Cheerily incident.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the alternate ending was kind of predicated on the sad face, as you put it. That whole reconciling with Luna, a little like, okay, I understand how you could get kind of bitter, having a little more experience in that arena, firsthand. But it's funny you say that, yeah, the alternate ending should have been split off earlier, because I had, after a certain point writing the story, I was like, well, it would be fun to do an alternate ending or an alternate version of this story. And yeah, I definitely could have split it off earlier. I'm a sucker for sad stories too, so I split it off where I chose to, because that scene with Cheerily dumping her was just too good. It was just too good twisting of the knife to pass up. I was like, no, I need to write this. People need to cry.
You're a heartless bastard, you know that.
You bastard.
Well, it's what makes the story good. I mean, it's like I think Vonnegut said it, where you take a character that everyone loves, you make people love this character, and then you just do the most horrible things you can think of. You put them through the most intolerable cruelties, and that is what makes a good story. That's what makes it interesting.
I could not agree more. As much as I hate reading it, as a writer myself, I write Star Fox fan fiction, and I'm a terrible person. Like, I go back and I'm like, as a reader of my own story, I hate myself. Like, it gets to the point where I'm reading and I'm just like, why did you do that? That is a horrible satanic thing that you just did. And then I'm like, you know what? I don't care, because I'm going to get people to be pissed at me for it, and that's fun. So, and people read it. Exactly. It gets hits. No. But and it makes for a relatively interesting story anyway. You wouldn't want, the same grayscale, sort of monotonous cotton candy pony stuff all the time. But shit, there was another thing that we just hit on, and I'm trying to think of what I was going to ask about. Oh, I remember. When you were writing, because there was a significant amount of time between you finishing Romance Reports and you doing the alternate ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed there is a level of a change of pace, and I think for the most part, it does feel written very differently because I attribute it mainly to Celestia, because when you have her and Twilight in the same place, there's just this. Your writing takes on this weird cosmic sort of a reality that's sort of this philosophical.
Cosmic reality.
Pretty,
wow, that's
pretty.
got a lot of comments, but I don't think I've heard that one yet.
This sort of pretty picture land of ideas and thoughts and stuff, because it's all there's very little dialogue, I guess, is the one thing I would say. Not little dialogue, but definitely way less than there is in the rest of the story.
I'd very dialogue heavy style. It's true.
Yeah. It's a lot of it is internal from Twilight, and a lot of it's descriptory. And so that's why it has this very interesting feel that's different from the main story, because it's not really I don't want to say it's not plot driven, but the alternate ending feels much more like this, or at least when it gets to Celestia, this sort of like you're just kind of being enveloped.
It has a much different mood, it's true.
It's sort of like you're being enveloped in the story, and you're just sort of like sitting there, just sort of the word basking sounds a little too
basting, steeping.
something. And you're just sort of like stewing, maybe is a
there
word.
There you go. Stewing is a good word for it.
Stewing.
Well, I wanted to. That was very purposeful, actually. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the length of time. Probably had something to do with it. I mean, between the main story and the alternating, it was a couple months. I wrote a few other things, and I kind of went a few different directions to got that out of my system. Kind of took a break from romance supports. When I came back to the story, I mean that difference in mood was very intentional. I mean, I have a very cosmic take on the princesses as characters. A lot of people write them as more earthly, more normal characters. And I in this story anyway, again, kind of like the shipping, I don't think of this as like the canon. This is just an idea I wanted to play with. I think of them as, much older, very Greek god kind of, not, untouchable, infinite quite, but very above normal characters. These are gods that represent ideas at some level. I mean, they're still beings in a physical sense. But anyway, so the ending, yeah, the mood was. I mean, everyone's had a really difficult breakup in their life, and it's not partially drawing on my own experiences, partially just writing how that goes. And as far as I know about it, I mean, in that alternate ending, Twilight is stewing in having just been brutally dumped. I mean, it's on several fronts, and it's just, it hollows you out. It's just an emotionally draining thing to go through, and it's fairly recent in the alt ending. I mean, she's there, being consoled, but it just weighs on you,
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And it did feel like that there's. It did feel like that there was a lot of that, the very beginning of the alternate ending, because sometimes I forget that there's that, I sort of block it out of my memory, that there's that whole part where, oh yeah, they just break up and never get back together again.
Yeah, the short flashback.
The short flashback. That
part I talked about making people cry. That thing, yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's the whole sad face thing. Yeah, so there is that part of it, and then all of a sudden when you go from that and switch to this whole Celestia thing, consoling, very motherly, sort of an idea, and you slowly, it's very slowly starts slipping into this more, sort of an idea where Celestia keeps trying to get at the fact of hint of Twilight. It's like it's okay, you're like when they get to the part where they talk about being friends, that's where the wall finally breaks down, because she can't be, Twilight can't just be, subject and princess, or, student and teacher, subject and master. It's like, oh shit, she just shattered that whole hierarchy dynamic, and now we're equal, we're peers, and it's very interesting to see how Twilight reacts to that sort of a thing. And you're yelling at your screen basically the whole time, going, Twilight, for the love of God, for the love of God, just own up to it and be like, okay, that's cool. I'm okay with being friends. And then,
I'll aboard the SS Twilestia.
And now, yeah, exactly. And, but she, and I'm still, there's parts where I have to go back through towards the very, because you keep it blocked off until pretty much the very end of the alternate ending. And it's sort of like, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Oh, it happened, the end. And and you hold it off for a very long time, and you keep people like going back and forth like, God damn it, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen?
Well, there won't be. It's, it's a pretty common suspense trope.
And in between that, you have these, the thing that was agonizing, and I am going to use the word agonizing in reading it, was that you have these small parts of plot where, and I don't mean the sexy kind, of where, you're like, or do I? Where you have, oh, maybe Twilight's going to get the courage to do X. And then you have pages of that cosmic reality thing I was talking about, and you totally forget what's happening. And you're like, oh, she's just basking in the presence of Princess Celestia for eons, in the part where she sort of semi turns her into an alicorn. Spoiler. And you're just like, which great scene, by the way, probably one of my favorite scenes in the story, I have to say, because it's just like, you're just like, holy shit, like, this is I feel like I'm on LSD. What is happening? Like, just shit's going on everywhere, and just flying through the universe with Princess Celestia. You feel like you're on it feels like the never-ending story. It feels like the never-ending story, and he's flying on his dog dragon, and and you're just like, what is this? But the question I had for
there's a question.
There was a question, and it's way back there, and it has to do with Luna, and the time gap that you had between the alternate ending and your regular story. Now, your Twilight is relatively written the same as her sort of panicky mode, sort of OCD self that you have her at the beginning of the story, where she's, trying to get all of her goals set and that sort of thing. And she's afraid of approaching, different ponies and really getting into the whole love affair thing. And so she's relatively the same. Celestia, you hadn't written too much of, and so, we're willing to see that character. But Luna feels like she takes on a different sort of, almost, I wouldn't say a completely different personality, but did you have trouble rewriting her for the alternate ending at all?
Well, two big things happened between the normal story and the alternate ending. Well, the first big thing was that Luna eclipsed her. So my portrayal of Luna in the original story is completely my invention, because so far in the show, all we had seen of her was, that very first pilot episode where she's Nightmare Moon, and then she's Luna for like a second. We got one line, and that was all we had of her character. So I was kind of doing my own thing there for a long time, and then suddenly she was in the show. She had a canon character. So a lot of that was me trying to square what I had done. I mean, obviously I couldn't go back and rewrite the entire story. I honestly don't think it's that far off as it is, but it's definitely has its points where it doesn't quite sync up. I mean, for obvious reasons. It's not. She wasn't a character at the time. I didn't have what we have now to go on. So that was a big thing. That was that affected my writing of the alternate, definitely. The second big thing was that part of the alternate ending was that I wanted to write Twilight Scatters. That was fun. That was something cool to do. But the other part of it was some of those scenes with Luna, some of that reconciling with her, showing her. I mean, you kept calling her a bitch. I definitely would disagree with that. But still, I mean, oh yeah, absolutely. We could get into that in a second, but
okay, let's do. I want to have that discussion.
But under the icy demeanor, there was more to her character, and I really, especially the first chapter though, there's that part where Luna comes to Twilight and actually apologizes.
It's on now.
And that was the scene I wanted to be in the original story. I couldn't think of a way to work it in a way that wouldn't mess up the pacing horribly, but I wanted to have that scene. I wanted to have that kind of pulling back the veil. Like, look, I thought what I was doing was right. Things got kind of messed up. Look, I'm sorry. This, I do care about you. This didn't quite go how I wanted it to, and having them sort of come to better terms. So that, yeah, I mean, those two things kind of came together, and you get a very different Luna in the alternate ending than you do in the main story. That remorse kind of comes out.
Right, and I think that's sort of one of the things that definitely hit me, because I was reading and I was thinking this is not the same Luna that I read before, and now that you mentioned. So you mentioned the episodes, and so now it does make sense that if you took that sort of more canon characterization of her, because I had thought initially that you had attempted to keep her straight-laced to your fanon you had established, and so I was unsure of whether it was just you had almost forgotten like specifically how you had written her, or if you indeed had tried to adopt more of the show-friendly idea of Luna.
I mean, canon is canon. For example, just a real quick here. If in the show, I always conceived of Twilight as an only child, right? She seemed to come off to me.
Right.
Suddenly in the show, she has.
We all did.
I'm not going to pretend that if I had written her as not having siblings, I'm not going to say, well, this is my version. I'm sticking to her. The show is the show. That is canon.
Right.
So I was trying to square a little more with that.
Yeah. Okay, so now before we get into this discussion of Luna, and I will preface that with the fact that I am basing this on pre-alternate ending Luna.
Okay.
Okay. Not the second one, the alternate ending one really threw me for a loop after I was like, oh man, I'm not sure what to think now.
Exactly.
But, yeah, right. So my argument of she is a bitch is going solely towards before alternate ending. But before we get into that, I do have just a few questions that are coming in from people on the chat.
Oh my!
Yes.
Look at the chat.
See, we talk for long enough, and eventually they start paying attention.
Oh.
Yep.
So. Several people have asked me, and of course this doesn't surprise me. They ask, "What is your favorite muffin?"
Let me guess who wrote that.
There were two of them. I'll give you two.
Texas
guesses.
Brony and Derpy
Nope.
Muffins.
Muffins and bacon.
Oh, and bacon. I should have remembered bacon. Yeah, bacon.
Ooh,
Muffins
bacon.
and bacon.
Bacon and muffins.
Bacon muffins. Wow.
Bacon and muffins.
Yes.
Do I have to actually answer? This doesn't sound like a deal.
No.
If you, it is. I mean, it's a legitimate lolsy question. If you do have a favorite muffin, please let me know.
Well, I'm gonna give this question the extremely serious and dull answer of blueberry. There, that's the lolls right there. That's the wacky lolls.
It suffices my taste. Giggity, I guess. I don't know. So then we have a slightly more serious question. It's a little non-pony directed.
Sure.
Befallen Tragedy asks, who is your favorite non-fan fiction writer?
Non-fan fiction writer. That that's changing all the time. Honestly, I'm one of those wishy-washy. Like I can never answer a "What's your favorite?" question without dissembling for about 20 minutes and giving a few answers. Right now, I'm big on Vonnegut. He's sort of a go-to guy for me. Sort of a lesser-known guy is Bill Bryson. He wrote a lot of comedy, kind of travel um, stories back in the day. He's still writing now, I believe. For nonfiction, I'm a huge Carl Sagan fan, which you could probably have keyed on to that from romance reports, but it really doesn't get any better than good old Sagan for the nonfiction.
And as sort of a follow-up to that, now that I'm thinking about it, what would you say? Do you have a particular genre that you like more than any other?
I'll just come out straight and say that I don't particularly read romance, which is
ironic,
surprising. Not something I'm usually into. I mean, I dabble in a little bit of everything. I was until very recently on a huge sci-fi kick. Kind of coming down off that. I'm trying to catch up on fan fiction, actually. I've had a lot of people, have you heard of this story? Have you heard of that story? Like you were talking about, what was the one, Ponies at War? Or
Ponies Make War, now known as the Immortal Game.
Yeah, I mean, I have a read later list on fan fiction, numbering at almost 100. There's so much out there that I feel like I got to catch up on. So I'm at the moment of it. I guess I'm trying to do that, kind of catch up on the fandom stuff. But yeah. Until recently, it was sci-fi. That's what I was big into.
Cool. Yeah, I have to say that in terms of if I'm just picking up a book, like an actual book, and reading it, I'm not the biggest romance fan. I mean, for one, humans, but right. But it's one of those things where I'm obviously sci-fi fantasy, I guess, would be the best category to throw me. But when it comes to the fanfic stuff, and you have developed characters that you already know and you already like, I think that's sort of the grounds where you're like, well, let's expand on what we already know about them. Because I don't like delving into a story and right at the beginning they're like, oh, here's this romantic situation. You're like, I don't even know who these people are yet, and so I think that's why maybe I don't know if I can say that for people in general, but at least for me anyway, why I like reading only that sort of stuff when I already know all the information there is to know, and it's just new scenarios that are playing out, basically. But,
so you're not a fan so much of characters that are already in relationships. You're more interested in how the relationship comes to be.
Well, I suppose so. I'm okay with ones that are already there, but it's just that I probably wouldn't pay as much attention to them because I wasn't there when they came into the relationship. It wasn't they had that experience, so to speak, and so it's it's a big deal for them, but I wasn't there. I didn't delve within that experience. I wasn't witness to the passion of said experience, and so it's one of those things where you're like, that's nice, but I don't know what made that magical, and so I don't have anything to base on really paying much attention to it. That's how I look at it anyway.
Okay. All right.
But so let's. I haven't received any of the questions. Questions, by the way, can be directed to me via going to IRC. And for those of us that tuned in late and did not hear how to do that, you can either go to ponify.me on our website and click on the chat, which is also ponify.me/chat. Or if you have an IRC client, it's super easy. You just go to irc.canternet.org and join the room Celestia Radio. And you can query me at /QUERY space DJ Shamrock and send me your questions to ask our lovely guest tonight, Sleepless Brony, writer of romance reports. Okay, so now getting into the nitty gritty here, we're going to have this discussion of Luna. Who,
before we go into that,
before we go, okay, yes.
Sorry, there's one thing I'd like to go back to real quick. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about the alt ending, the Twilight and Celestia, you were talking about the redefining themselves as friends, that moment. Mentioning that is really important. We moved on before I could say it, but I wanted to point out that I'm really glad that you saw that as that was something that I was trying really hard to convey as I was writing. That was something I was really anxious about and focused on. I think it's important when doing that ship with those two characters in order to avoid it being, I guess, creepy is the only word I can really think about. I mean, you're talking about an older character with like their younger student, and there's a lot of bad implications you could have for it. I think that it's important to do it in a way that feels healthy. To have them redefine their relationship as mature adults. I mean, I know you said you don't read a lot of fan fiction, but another thing that happened between reading the normal story and reading the alternate ending was I read Eternal by Device Heretic. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's something in the fandom that does that relationship thing with Twilight and Celestia extraordinarily well. So I'm not going to say the alternate ending wasn't inspired by that, because it was definitely influenced by it. But I think that was something I was trying really hard to do, that whole elevation of Twilight, making them feel like equals. So I'm glad you brought that up. That makes me feel like I did my job as a writer.
Well, definitely. I think that now that we are touching on that subject, it was a very big part of, because as you say, there's good stories out there. I'm not ashamed to say that I have read incest stories before, and I have no problem with it. But oh snap! Drop the hammer. But
different strokes and all that.
Anything's good for me. I would pretty much read anything that doesn't involve gore.
QCOM is our QCOM's our cum dumpster. So
thanks for that.
He'll read anything. I understand why that's not a road that you would go down for this particular story, and it's not like you're trying to say, "Oh, let's save the innocents," because there's already sex in the story. So
right, it's not really about that.
It doesn't play into the story quite as much, because you're talking about these very direct relationships that she is establishing. There's the dating thing. It's not fostered in such a way. It's almost as if the whole story would be meaningless if all of a sudden you said, oh, and now there's this sort of motherly-daughterly relationship thing that we're just going to go with, because it bypasses all of that whole idea of being equals and having dating and all that kind of thing. It just completely bypasses that. So I understand why you didn't do that. But in reference to the actual bit about the friends thing, I did like, and it was hard to miss, because as soon as that happens, well, maybe not right the instant of, because it's been a week or so before after I read it last, but there's the huge, and I'm gonna call it huge, because there's actual like aggressive wording and attacks between Twilight and Celestia, and there's the part, I don't remember the line, curse my memory, but where Twilight says, oh, well, we're friends now, sort of in this almost derogatory way towards Celestia. Well, she's like, well, then let's freaking be friends already, and it's kind of a thing.
And things happen from there, possibly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, right. And so, it's fun. Okay, go ahead.
Real quick, with pretty much trying to go back to what you were saying about when you're writing a story like this, it's something that if someone's gonna read it, they're pretty much gonna know already what they're getting themselves into. In a sense.
Oh, in reference to tags.
In reference to.
I mean, there's a big sex button right there under the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
So, you know, they shouldn't have any qualms with any issues if you write anything between, you know, incest or whatever.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
that's
I
all I was
a
going
personal.
at.
I think that's a personal preference thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're interested in reading about sex doesn't mean you're also interested in reading about incest. I mean, there's
Or
there's
any
really
of the
both
numerous,
there.
or any of the numerous other things that go along with that
Man.
huge generic category. You know?
Yes, indeed.
But
Anyway.
but yeah. So this whole argument that sort of it's almost it is sad, and there is a part where you're kind of like, you know, this hurts because you can tell Celestia. On one hand, you're like, bitch, just like hurry up and go with it and be like, yes, I want to be with Twilight. And then on the other hand, you're like, man, I kind of really feel bad for her because she's getting owned right now, and she's not really saying anything to defend herself. And Twilight is just starts reaming her. It's almost like she snaps, and she's like, you know what? This isn't fair to me as an individual. You know, she sort of breaks free of that whole paradigm of I'm the student, I must obey, and she's like, no, that's not okay. You know, if we're going to be peers, if we're going to be friends, and she emphasizes friends, I think you even capitalize it in the story. And she's like, yeah, perhaps. Yeah. The semantics. And she, you know, she drives the point home, and she's like, if we're going to be friends, then, you know, at least give me the dignity of being able of letting me choose what I want, you know, kind of a thing, and don't just assume that you have somehow manipulated me into believing this, which is something actually that's on an entirely other subject is really interesting, because on the Immortal game there is this almost reversed side of that where Celestia actually does spoiler actually does take advantage, not in a mean way necessarily, of Twilight by manipulating all of her decisions down a certain path. And so it's interesting that there's that parallel that I know was not created on purpose, but it's there, and it's an interesting idea of, you know, does Celestia get too much into being the chess master, and does she sometimes either think that it's not a good thing, and so she tries to distance people because of it, or is there something else at play? Is she not doing it and thinks she's doing it, or is she doing it and thinks that she's in complete control and it's okay, but she's really out of control, trying to take advantage of situations? But yeah, and but this story definitely, when it gets to that point, you're just like, wow, you know, I never thought, because this whole time, you write Celestia very interestingly, and I say that because I don't really know how to describe her. She's almost overwhelmingly like self-submissive is the only way I can think to describe her in this story, because she's so compassionate, and she has this aura that just commands respect, and yet at the same time, for most of the portions, she's in these very, like, you even do it physically to her actual stances. She's in sort of compromising positions. She, like, you know, she'll bow her head, or she'll lay down, or she'll you know, do all these other things, and
putting herself on Twilight's level.
Her wording and all these other things that she does, and it does feel weird from an outside perspective. You're kind of like, wow, this is really interesting. You know, it goes back to what you said about them being, you know, these godly cosmic figures versus the earthly ones, is that how can this being that is looking so almost, I'm willing to say, pitiful at certain points, towards the end there, where she's like, no, leave me be, this is the worst possible thing, you know, she almost feels like she's getting a little melodramatic towards the end, because, you know, Twilight's like, no, seriously, just tell me what's going on, I want to help you, and and Celestia's just like,
Like,
no,
"But
I must
can't."
go to the balcony.
Yeah.
I can't. And and Luna is just there. I almost feel like she's almost ready to start laughing almost at how ridiculous her sister is being at this point. And
Just to go check her mail.
and so, it's just it's completely ridiculous. But I would encourage anyone to specifically, I mean, reading the story as a whole, but the alternate ending as well, because damn, there's just something about Celestia that makes you go, I don't know what is happening, but this is so weird, and where am I? And I guess the Luna topic is a good way to segue.
Well, if I could
unless
respond,
you want to interject
was-
some more ideas.
trying to parse the question exactly, but I mean, I do. If I could ramble a little bit,
Go for it. That's what we're here
two
for.
things in response to that, basically. So the first was Twilight in that alternate ending. Yeah, she's at that point in the story. I think it was important. One of the reasons I chose, I mean, the serious reason that I chose to place the alternate ending where I did, is that Twilight's been through a lot at that point. I mean, I hope that I kept her still, close to her character, but another point of it was that she had really grown by then. She had matured. She understands a lot more about how relationships work and how she works emotionally. And having gone through all that and grown that way, it made those scenes with Celestia possible. That's what made it, to me, possible for her to, stand up to Celestia in that way, and to realize, exactly what those feelings were and be comfortable with them. It was only if if you went straight to show Twilight with Celestia and said, maybe we should be friends, just straight up Twilight not having any experience in any kind of, emotionally mature relationship would just be kind of a mess. I mean, that was the whole point of the story, was that going through those things were necessary to know what you want and put yourself in a healthy place. So that was something that I really hoped to convey purposefully. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was something I was going for, I guess. As for the sisters, as for the princesses, yeah, in this the way I was writing them here, you mentioned the dichotomy between the way Celestia is acting about all this and Luna was acting about all this is very important, because I tried to write them as opposites. Again, going to that whole God things representing different things. I mean, in the opening of the show, they're represented as a yin yang, for Christ's sake. I mean, they are day and night. So when I was writing them, that was kind of the way I conceived Luna, was the opposite of Celestia. Celestia is, motherly, kind, supporting. What does that make Luna? I mean, again, this was before Luna Eclipse, so this is how I was coming up with what I was doing. But so you're talking about Celestia, having problems accepting her feelings for Twilight, feeling guilty that she might be manipulating Twilight. I think that would be, a thing that she should be concerned about, being a powerful figure, especially in Twilight's life. And that's that's pretty much what I was going for. But hate to keep saying it like that. I was like, oh yes, everybody gets exactly what I was trying to write. But I don't know how else to put it.
No, it's good. I mean, it's good to have discussion, because we don't
really don't want to sound like that. It's just like what I sheepishly hoped that I was getting across.
Well, it's good. That's one of the purposes. I know this has not been any sort of a traditional interview, but in terms of people musicians, artists, writers, they're so involved with their work that they don't get out and talk to the public much about their work. It's sort of centralized on their own little platforms, and there's messages back and forth. But to really have an in-depth discussion about, the behind the scenes about the story, that's the main purpose of what I hope to get across with doing interviews like this. Because it's whether it's necessary or not, I don't really care. I think it's necessary, but I think it helps people understand more about writing in general, but also more into the minds of the people who make the stuff that they love. So
And here we are.
And here we are. And I'm trying to think. There was a small part of something you said about Celestia that I was going to comment on.
We were both kind of rambling for a long time.
It was the first. I know it's very it's very back and forth, hit and miss here. The first thing that the first part that you commented on. I'm trying to think. I hate that when that happens.
Well, I was talking about Celestia being kind and motherly and supportive, opposite of Luna trying to show up Twilight feeling guilty about possibly having feelings for her.
I remember now. The thing that caught my attention that you mentioned was taking show Twilight and throwing her into this scenario, and it's kind of funny because when you look at the alternate ending, clear up until that point where I mentioned before, you're basically like, no, it's not going to happen, no, it's not going to happen, no, it's not going to happen, and then suddenly at the very end you're like, oh wait, uh-oh, and then there's a fight between the two of them. I'm going to call it a fight because I feel
it almost is. Yeah, that's not. It wouldn't be inappropriate.
It's a stretch for some people, but I'm going to go ahead and call it that. But up to that point, I would say that Twilight is exactly Twilight. I think that there is, to see her come so far in the story, and it's almost like, let me think of a good analogy for this. It's almost like either you're playing a game or let's say you're watching an anime, because it often happens in anime. And
oh no, I'm getting compared to anime. Oh boy.
Oh man, here we go. And
run.
And you go and you're fighting all the things, and they're fighting the demons or whatever your particular story of choice is doing. And the main character is building up strength, and you get to this point right before the very end, and you look back and you go, holy shit, I am a god, and you're just like, I am destroyer of worlds, I can do anything. And then all of a sudden it's like final boss and you get raped, and it's just like, it just destroys you. That is what it felt like when Twilight in the alternate ending is approached by Celestia, because even though Celestia is not exerting that at all, it's just like Twilight has come so far, and yet she still is having the same issues as she was in the very beginning of the story, when she's like, oh my god, Celestia's here, the same way we know her as in the show.
It's her one last weakness. It's she's still worshipping the princess.
Yeah, and she's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. It's just like, holy shit, here's the princess. She is the ruler of all, kind of a thing. And
she's so perfect.
Right? And so, Twilight does develop this whole paradigm when you're looking at it, and you're like, she really is that sort of like main hero that goes throughout it. And even though she becomes super powerful or whatever, what have you, super knowledgeable,
super proficient at relationships,
super proficient developing relationships, at the very end she's still no match for the god character, and until the very end, of course.
I was going to say, she is in the end.
She is in the end.
It's the one last hurdle.
She's eventually pushed in, and I think true to the idea of said games and animated shows and whatnot, it ends up being the conflict itself with the final boss that ends up leveling her up to an extent to where she can overcome said obstacle.
And claim the prize.
Exactly. I mean, how many times have we played Pokemon and had to fight and die against the gym leader over and over again before our guys were leveled up high enough to defeat them? I'm sorry.
I had to die fighting Celestia over and over again until she was powerful enough to win the relationship. We're straying out of what I wanted to convey there. Exactly.
Right? That's what you wanted people to think. You wanted people to think, okay,
this is how relationships work, people. You just keep fighting until you win. Then you have the person you want.
Exactly. It's just like that in real life.
Yep, exactly.
At least for women it is. But
for lesbians, we're actually ponies. This is all very realistic.
Right. Okay, so I do have. I'm going to continue to put off the Luna discussion. I've got another question.
Ooh, a question. Okay.
And this one is also a non-pony related question.
Well.
Though sort of related, I guess. Befallen Tragedy wants to know if you have written within any other fandoms outside of My Little Pony.
Oof. Sensitive topic. Way back in the day, way back in the day, I wrote some Final Fantasy fanfiction that I never actually published in any way, shape, or form. So that didn't see the light of day for good reason. That's about it, honestly.
Okay. Well, fair enough. I know that
this was my first actually posted story in any kind of public capacity.
Yes, job well done. Congratulations. I know those feels in terms of, you know, in terms of the you know, fan fiction past and you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda, you know, sort of things. But
it's hard to look back at what you. I mean, I look back at early chapters of romance reports, and I just shake my head. I can't even handle reading through it these days.
See, that's one thing that you know, I won't say that I dislike about, but it really it makes me frown at people who are writers or musicians, for that matter, that do that. And it's like, you know, at least you haven't actually done it yet. I'm not saying you won't do it, because I've seen so many people on FimFiction go back through, and I'm like, wait a minute, why am I getting updates for this story? I've already read this. And then they're like, oh, by the way, now it's like 10 times better. And you're like, shit, now I have to read it again. God damn it. And,
oh no, why?
Oh, why? Cruel world. Why do you curse me so? And but yeah, you know, it's I think, in my opinion, it's okay to improve on stuff and write new stuff, but it's hard for me to justify changing something that has had such an impact, or, you know, has been such a feature, you know, to people. You know, even if it's the little things. Even the little things are like, oh, I remember that mistake where you didn't capitalize Celestia or whatever. You know, it's just funny things like that. Even though you're like, crunching your teeth and you're like, man, shit, why is that in there?
Why is that in there dozens of times? Oh God.
Dozens of times.
Before you go, you are aware that I basically did that with romance reports, right?
See, the funny thing, if you did do that, I was not privy to it, because I read it on Explicit Archive first.
Okay, yeah, well, you're one of the old school fans, right?
Yes, and then I came back when this was because I'd read your story, and then as I said, I started to get into fan fiction, and that's when I discovered the actual FimFiction website, which one of my co-owner of Celestia Radio, PH Pony, and I quite people, and so we sort of, you know, find fics, and we're like, hey, read this one or whatever, and so then I found your story on FimFiction, and I was like, oh shit, now I got to go through and check off that I've read all these chapters, so that my, you know, my pages read dick size meter on the side goes up.
The numbers have to go up, yeah, it's true.
And I don't know, I'm at like 1.2 million or some shit, I don't know. But thanks to your story, and thanks to Immortal Game, which is fucking huge. But you know, and so that's when I went back and I was like, oh, holy shit, alternate ending, and I skipped straight to that. You know, I didn't reread the thing. So
I mean, it's understand. It's a long story. I'm not gonna say people have to. Great story
that I recommend to people, called The Romance Reports by Sleepless Brony. Go to FimFiction. But yeah, and I think I'm trying to recall now. Didn't you get you got featured, right, when you started doing the alternate?
Well, here's the thing. I didn't notice so much when I was featured. People are going to call bullshit and say that I'm trying to play this off, but I honestly was not really paying attention. So when the flood of comments and PMs came in demanding to know why I was being featured twice, when that started flooding my inbox, I did not know how to react in any way whatsoever.
So, yeah, might I just say, to those of you that are for whatever reason upset that this man was featured twice on FinFiction, fuck off, because like, I think it's well deserved that he was featured twice, whether that was a mistake on whoever's part or whatnot. But
if I could, as a brief aside, I could quickly
go ahead.
explain what he goes. I actually have spoken with a few of the moderators of FinFiction, but basically they changed the algorithm for what goes in the features box. That
right,
it used to just be recently posted stories, but they jiggered it around basically a little so that older stories that had been updated that were getting a lot of readers had a better chance to be on there, because for a long time I guess it was just only things that were recently posted. So they did that, and I started posting the alternate ending, and suddenly Romance Reports was back in the featured box because people were checking out the alternate ending, and right. Yeah, I mean, it drew in a whole bunch of new attention. But I hadn't even known that I was on there the first time. I honestly, I wasn't looking at FinFiction a lot when I first posted the story. When I was writing the story, they didn't allow explicit work. Right. On FinFiction, so it wasn't really on my radar so much. I only checked the explicit archive, obviously, because that's where it was posted. And then people, mentioned to me, hey, they lifted the restriction. You should post this on FinFiction. Oh, well, hey, what the hell? Why not? People want to read it there too.
Why not?
So that's what happened.
Yep. Yeah, it was sort of unnerving that people were so upset about that, and there were a lot of people too. They were like, how dare they put this up there twice? And I'm just like, man, like, get over yourself. They have like 5 featured a day or something, like somehow it's this extreme invasion on your privacy for them to have, this fucking story up there twice, whatever.
I've never been up there once. How did he get it twice? What the hell?
Right. It's just kind of like, man, I'm not even fully aware of why that's even. They probably are butt mad about not being on there at all even once, but but
they don't have to PM me about it. It's not like I really
yeah, it's not like you did. It's not like you were like, oh guys, here, I'll give you $20 to put me on the featured. No, that didn't happen. But
not that I'll admit to.
Not that he'll admit to it. No, I think the story goes fine by word of mouth. I think it has enough popularity that it doesn't really matter if it's featured or not. But, so I have what I'm going to call a mini question, because I haven't heard of it and I'm not expecting you to know of it. But okay. Someone was wanting to know if you have ever read the story Background Pony.
Background Pony. Is this a question from the chat?
Yes, one of our chat members, Befallen Tragedy again.
Befallen Tragedy. Wow, this should actually be. I'm sorry, Befallen Tragedy. I'm not looking directly at the chat here. Let me.
Well, they're personally messaging me with the question, so you wouldn't have seen it. You wouldn't have seen it, but
I'm looking it up on FinFiction right now. I haven't read it, but I'm gonna give it a quick look here.
And the reason he asked,
please, yes.
It's because he says that he wants to know your stance on it, because apparently most of our listeners hate it or are not huge fans of it. So I don't know if this was sort of a rallying cry to get all of us behind Sleepless Brony to say, yeah, fuck that story or whatever. I don't know, but.
Ooh, well, I mean, sorry to disappoint. I haven't read it. I don't. I mean, if I was to join in with, yeah, fuck that story, it would really be ultimately hollow and meaningless.
Right. So
Story about Lyra. She's stuck in Ponyville. She plays music. Okay. Well, that's a summary. Putting that on the read later list. Gonna see what happens there.
We'll see. We shall see what happens. Yeah. What I usually do is I'll read. I'll have my to read list up to like 10, and I'll go through and I'll read all of them, and then I'll go, shit, I need 10 more, and then I just go back through and keep adding more and more. And so what I've done now is I've resigned myself to only reading updates on stories I have already read, because if I touch my 10 lists of stories that I want to read, I will have to fill it up with more, and I do not want to do it.
I know I do the same thing. I try to refrain from looking around too much because the list is too long as it is.
Yeah, you just to get on these kicks, and you're like, shit, what am I doing? And then I stop, and then I go back, and I'm like, oh, updates on stories I've read, and I'm like, what was this about? I don't even remember. Especially when you have in your favorites like 10 or 20 different, Twilight Ash fics, and you're like,
they all start to blur together.
Which one? They do. It's so true. You're like, which one is this one? Well, this is the one where Applejack hates them. Okay, so that's one. Or something like that. There's usually like one little smidgen of information where you're like, oh, that's this one where Twilight and Rainbow Dash are, in love or whatever. And sometimes you get the rare ones, which are like, it's a Twilight Dash ship fic, but they hate each other, and you're like, okay, so that one, sort of stands out a little more.
Doing something new with the property, yeah.
But yeah. Now that we've rounded all the corners,
Sham.
Yeah, I don't know if you hear that, but
I'm getting a bunch of mic buzz from someone.
Yeah, I hear it too. Sham is blanking out on us.
Can you hear me?
Well, in the meantime...
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Are we good?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. What happened? Because I continually was talking, so...
You cut out with a
Yeah. Now it keeps happening.
There it goes again.
Shit. Well, hold on. Let me look at my... I'm gonna take out... So.
All right, well, while he does that, anyone got any more questions in the chat, I guess? I'm looking at it right now. I've been kind of blanking out on that one.
There was one question. Do you not only write fanfics, but do you read any? And if so, what are your favorites?
Do I read any? I do read plenty. I've been trying to read more. My recent big phase, I already mentioned Eternal by Device Heretic. That's a really excellent, long, epic Twilestia. There's one in progress called Composure by Varanus. Again, Twilestia, really good, really building up to something amazing. I mean, it's not finished. That one's, but that's a big favorite of mine. Colden Gardez is an author I really love. I don't know if anyone's familiar with his work, but he wrote Naked Singularity, which is just one of the best works of comedy I've ever read, fan fiction or not. Absolute Anonymous, read several of her works. Her big one, she would want me to plug the games we play, but it's, I mean, it's good. It's I'm sure everybody already heard of it, but a lesser known one she did is called Homegrown. That's really excellent. But that's just naming a few. I'm sure I'm missing some. Oh, Norm de Plume. Speaking of Klopp, great dude. He wrote a few very cute little ones. Yeah, I don't think he just got on Fan Fiction. He's on there. I'm trying to remember the name. First and Last to Know. That was the one he wrote that I really liked. But there's a handful for you.
Okay.
After
and, is my mic okay now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to be cautious now because I don't know what the hell caused that. So I couldn't hear it, the buzz because my headset doesn't play my audio back to me. So, okay, so, and fuck, there was something I was going to say. Oh yes, while we're on the subject of other writers and things, I wanted to give a shout out. I know he's not listening, but a shout out to Corey, the author of the Vinyl Scratch tapes. He just got engaged.
Somebody proposed.
He proposed and his girlfriend said yes. So congratulations to Corey, writer of Vinyl Scratch tapes, and of course our sort of affiliate since we do host the Vinyl Scratch tapes radio play here. And it's a lot of fun working with the guy, and I'm working with him a little bit now as well on Philly Games, who we'll be interviewing next week. And lots of fun things there for their game Welcome to Ponyville. Not so much Clop-centered, but still shipping in that. But
we should make this a thing now, Sham. We should have Sunday nights as Clop nights.
Oh God, it's basically the marshmallow. It's
not as vulgar, obviously. We want a little bit. We want something a bit more class, but.
It's true.
Classy Clop is.
We want classy Clop. That's what we want.
It's true. The light shipping stuff. So yes, we've rounded the corners, and though it is getting a little bit late, I do want to have this sort of Luna discussion.
Okay.
Before we depart, So I guess you know my stance. I think she's a bitch, judging by the first part of the story, before the alternate ending. And this is within your own fanon. I'm not looking at the show at all in terms of this, but there's I don't know. It's later on in the story you realize that there is this sort of manipulation going on, and that she's sort of like, well, I might have been interested in you, but really what I was trying to do was, to make you a better person or whatever kind of bullshit that she tries to say. But, but at the very beginning you're like, this is interesting because you feel like she's really going to start kind of pulling on her strings and stuff. And she even admits a lot of the time Luna's like, I am very different from my sister. We do not do things the same way. I am very unorthodox compared to her. And
she comes out right with it. She's like, listen, this is not a normal ride you're in for here.
Yeah, she's like, don't pretend like this is going to be, something that's going to be straightforward or whatever.
I have warned you.
I have, exactly. And essentially, her warning is almost like you, the writer, being like, hey, FYI, shit's gonna hit the fan here in the story several times.
Foreshadowing, spoilers.
Foreshadowing, exactly. Spoilers, by the way. But so give me some kind of a counter to why you think that she is not, and I'm not saying that she is just like the worst person in the entire world. I'm just saying, the fact that she willingly admits to manipulating Twilight in such a way that pretty much drives her to tears. In my opinion, bitch. So describe to me why not bitch.
Well, I'm not gonna take exception to. I mean, you can interpret the character any way you want. I know a lot of people do, and I definitely see what you mean. I'm not gonna say she didn't do anything wrong or hurtful. I mean, bitch is a little strong though. I mean, I don't like using that, for any real reason. But before I go further, let me. One funny thing. I mean, I've heard this plenty, as I'm sure you could guess. I've gotten a lot of comments to this effect. A lot of people, especially after that Act 2, Luna dropping Twilight, people, just all caps comments, OMG, what a bitch, that kind of thing. Nothing has made my readers rage more. It's with the possible exception of the thing I wrote about Rarity, but I don't think you read that. So anyway, the thing with what I was writing with Luna there was that, again, going back to the interpreting the character as kind of a goddess, as somebody that's millions of years old and has been through countless relationships, most of whom are long dead, and has kind of come to treat them as not disposable, but all things are temporary. Basically, she's looking at this as very kind of, she's got this ground down, practical look at getting satisfaction. And I mean, again, opposite of her sister, you know, Celestia is portrayed as very regal, love, romantic. You know, I bond with one person and we're soulmates until they die, and this is how I do things. And then Luna is the opposite. She's the knight. She represents sex and temptation
and nightclubs,
physical pleasure. Yeah, nightclubs. I mean, that's her thing. I mean, if you can handle that ride, then you're in for it, and that's cool. If you're like Twilight and what you're looking for is a stable, you know, more quiet relationship, then yeah, you're gonna end up crying. I don't think. I wouldn't call her a bitch. I really wouldn't. I think in the end, the lesson I wanted her to teach was right. It's like you can't put people on a pedestal. You can't look at love that way. You can't have these unrealistic, worshipful expectations of a mate. You have to look at your partner as a person and look at the relationship as a living, changing thing. I think that's what she was trying to communicate. It's just that she's a harsh mistress, you know, to put it the only way I can really think of right now. One commenter put it really well, I thought, in saying that she doesn't coddle her students like Celestia does. You know, she's an old school, Old Testament kind of goddess who doesn't take any bullshit or excuses and just kind of lays down the law as she sees it.
Right. Now, one thing I think that, given what you said, I do need to amend a little bit of how I worded bitch, and that is to say that when I'm thinking of it in that way, the way you portray them, and as you talk about them being the gods and things, she is a bitch in the way that like Greek and Roman and gods were basically bitches
yeah,
and
absolutely.
assholes.
And a lot of this was drawn from mythology. I mean, look at Loki. I mean, to me, Luna is a lot of Loki. She's a trickster.
Oh yeah.
She's a playful, menacing kind of trickster, cunning god.
But in that sort of idea of this aloof, nothing is permanent, and everything is free flowing, and it's not so much that she's not intending for her on her own part or for other people to perceive her necessarily as a bitch. But I think that her actions, even though she would say, well, I'm not intending to be, well, this is for her own good, sort of a thing, or just to say, oh, well, it's not a trifle, it's not that big of a deal, sort of a thing. I have, loved many beings and such, as she might say, but
loved in quote marks.
But when it's right. Exactly. But I think that from Twilight's perspective of, I was this, individual who knew nothing. I was completely ignorant to the subject matter, and perhaps Twilight is somewhat at fault for assuming that the ride, so to speak, was going to be similar to what she'd done with Celestia. And so perhaps she's partially at fault for assuming. But, I definitely think that there are parts where Celestia... I think Celestia does call it a few times. I think you have her talking about it in the story, where she's like, Luna, and she does. She has this hard time not stepping in, and she's just like, I can see you basically doing this, not so much taking advantage of Twilight, but not stopping what you're doing. Because in Celestia's mind, she's like, you know that Twilight is not fully aware of certain things that she's doing, maybe, and that you're willing to go ahead and let her do this to herself is not being, a very good, sort of a...
You're setting her up to learn things the hard way.
Right.
You're not catching her falling that way. You're just letting it happen.
And in relation to things in relation to matters of the heart, those things when you learn them the hard way can be
crushing,
life changing. Yes, shattering, crushing, devastating. And so that sort of sets up the whole idea of man, maybe she wasn't exactly being such a nice person.
That's the thing. I mean, I would agree. She definitely wasn't being nice. She's not kind. She's not caring. She's not, she definitely does not act. I mean, it's not, when I took exception to, throwing the word bitchalette, I mean, that kind of thing, when you write female characters, you get a lot of people coming at you with comments like that. Why is this character such a bitch? Why is this character such a slut? Stuff that's very loaded, and a lot of the time I get kind of skeeved out by commenters and that. I mean, try not to bag on anybody here, but it's like you're coming at this sometimes. Not you, personally. I'm talking about the commenters. When people come at these stories like this, sometimes with some baggage, it's hard to separate sometimes. I mean, I know what you mean. Luna's definitely harsh in the story. She plays the part of the antagonist. I do think ultimately, in my mind, the real antagonist is Twilight. I mean, having that concept of puppy love that she clings to and that kind of thing. The point of the story is her getting over her own misconceptions about love and what love is, and that ultimately the things that hold her back are herself. I mean, Luna is like a guide in that she is an antagonist, but in the end she does. Twilight learns valuable lessons from her. She doesn't learn them in an easy way. She doesn't learn them in a painless way. Definitely, I mean, Luna is in this story. She is a device to make this conflict happen. To have this lesson be taught to Twilight.
I would definitely be willing to call Luna an anti-hero.
Anti-hero. Excellent. Great one.
Because
she takes the fall.
Yeah, she definitely is that character. And although she is not the central character, because there are plenty of stories where the central character is actually an anti-hero, but where the antagonist, where the conflict is self conflict, and sometimes it's hard to pinpoint an outside force. Definitely, Luna, I would say, is sort of that person that's the tipping scale on the balance of pushing Twilight into the actual full-on war that she has to have with herself.
Right, the catalyst.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. She's the catalyst to that effect, and definitely. So,
so when you say Luna's a bitch, I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing. It's not. She definitely has.
And I understand your not passiveness, but not eagerness to jump to use the term.
Yeah. But playing it carefully here,
As a media personnel, as a broadcaster, of someone who's read the story, as a reader, I am willing to tell other people that I think that she is a bitch. but definitely I understand why you would avoid particularly tiptoeing around that particular word. And I have, I agree. I've been there in the comment section, at least from the alternate ending on. I've been.
Your comments were all, as I remember, there were no all caps proclamations.
Right.
Your comments were well articulate and conversational.
I try to write relatively how I speak, and in fact, it's kind of funny because recently I was on a vacation, and some friends that I knew from online who I almost never get to see in person. We met up, and they mentioned, they said, it's really funny getting to see and talk to you in real life and hear how people type on the computer, because it comes out, people can pick up on that sort of thing, and it is kind of funny. But yeah, it's you've always got, the more and more popular you become as a writer, the more and more diverse amounts of groups you're going to get, and you're going to get people where you're like, I really don't want to talk to that person.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. Thank you. And I want to stress, I really don't. I don't think of you that way. I mean, I'm not. I know I get a little touchy about that, but it's it is a discussion to be had. I mean, Luna's role in the story it is controversial. It's questionable what she did and how she acted. I'm not going to make excuses for that. I mean, I'm just trying to put together, the story. But and be true to the characters, at least the way I interpreted them and thought it would go down. I mean, obviously a lot of it's changed now that she has a kind of canon personality.
Right.
Not as much as I would have thought, honestly. I mean, I think there are elements of how I conceive Luna in the show's portrayal of her. Mm-hmm. But because you have this kind of proud, icy, in ways aloof, who has trouble, character who has trouble, making relationships with normal characters, being on the same level as others. Anyway, I'm just rambling on my ass at this point.
I think, no, I agree. And as an aside to that, I can safely say that, looking back on it and reflecting on what we've seen, in season 2 of her, especially with Luna Eclipse, I would say that Luna Eclipse has become, it's not my favorite episode, but it is now my go-to episode for people outside the fandom. When they say, I've never heard of this show, will you show it to me? I go to Luna Eclipse because it's funny. It's generally funny to most people. It's not something that you have to be, it's no inside thing, but there's enough sort of inside funny stuff that you're kind of like, that other people would get or other people would find funny. Fun has been doubled, and how many points do I receive? That sort of stuff. That's just kind of
all
like
the fish out of water comedy, yeah.
Right, and it's definitely one of the. I'm not going to call it dark because it's not dark, but it's it's one of the least of the flashy, pretty, flowery episodes, and
right,
so you get to really see what the show's capable of, for a Halloween episode, and I think it's a good one, definitely for people that are intimidated about watching something like that's a little less manly, I guess.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, it's a really good episode. I do think that it's one of my favorites, easily. I wouldn't have thought of introducing people to the show with it, though. I would have got stuck on the, not knowing the backstory of who it is.
Sure, there is that, but,
It's pretty well explained in the episode, though. I don't think it's too big of a hurdle now that I think about it.
Yeah, because most people would say, when it comes to getting people to the show, a lot of people try to show people the first 2 episodes, and most people have said that's a terrible idea because they're not exactly the best episodes.
No, yeah, that is.
And but yeah. So is there anything that's left? I'm kind of feeling a wind down for this. I think we've covered quite a lot of the story. I'm glad to say that the interview thus far has gone extremely well. I haven't received any questions in a while and stuff. So, is there any are there any sort of last things that you'd like to bring up or discuss before we finish, or shout outs or what have you?
Well, I did some sufficient shouting out in the authors you like section. Other than that, I mean, I thank you for having me. Certainly, I mean, this is the first time I've really put myself out there. Voice in the fandom, speaking. I mean, I did the written interview for the Vault, and that's about it as far as straying out of my little fan fiction corner. So yeah, again, thank you for having me. It's been really fun. I honestly wish I could do stuff like this more often. I always enjoy discussing, stories and ideas in the fandom and what's out there.
Definitely.
want to thank the makers of the show, obviously, everybody else who writes out there, even if even if you write nothing but a few words, a little one shot, everybody that writes is contributing to the fandom in some way or another, and helping us build this this big crazy thing that's happening. So,
yeah, and definitely, I gotta say a big, thanks obviously for writing the story. From everyone that's listening, that's read it. Great story, love it. Of course, it got me back into reading fan fiction, so damn you for that.
Hey, well, if I can at least claim that one, but got it.
But and thanks for taking the interview, because I'm going to be honest, of the few writers I've followed, you're definitely one of the more popular ones that I follow, and so I wasn't sure. I know sometimes artists and writers and musicians don't really like to get in the spotlight or anything. They like to kind of stick to their corner of the internet and do their thing. But I'm glad we could get you out here and have you, at least for the first time, doing some sort of an audio thing. And maybe when you get your Flutter Mac done, or some of the other stories, we can meet again and try, and now that I have you on Skype and stuff and email, we can
I'd be happy to
set something else up in the future or whatnot. But
yeah. One more thing. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
As long as we're doing the shout-outs and the plugins, there's a strong possibility I'll be at Canterlot Gardens. Forgot to mention that before.
Very nice. I will. I'll be in the state. Unfortunately, I won't be at the con because I'm a department head for another convention for relaxation, which is in Columbus, Ohio. So the same weekend.
Same time. Wow.
Same weekend. So damn my luck on that. But yeah.
All right. Well, that's too bad I won't get to see that. I had no idea you guys were BronyCon. I wasn't. Like I said, I don't stray from my corner of the internet too often, so I'm kind of oblivious in ways.
Yeah, it's too bad we didn't link up there, because I could have thought about it before. But well, there's always future ones. There's
always next year.
We go to pretty much a lot of cons now, starting with BronyCon. We are on full steam, and we've been all over the place, and we will have maybe one or two people, I think, going to Canterlot, but I'm heading to Brony Fanfare in early September, and then the other one in late September. But yeah, there's all kinds of awesome conventions that we'll be going to and broadcasting and doing stuff for us. So
cool.
Yeah. So if nothing else, then next BronyCon. But perhaps something before then. Who knows? But so, well, anyway, definitely, thanks for being on, and we've had a ton of fun having you on, and we'll have this recording up and posted in the next few days, right, QCOM?
I hope so. I still got to work on the one from last night, but
yeah,
I've got all my needs.
That was me making sure you weren't dead, so you were actually into.
Well, and actually, when we go off air, I want to kind of direct your attention to a story that I've been reading.
Okay, that's cool. Real quick, someone had a Befallen Tragedy again. Had a really quick question.
Wouldn't want to disappoint Befallen Tragedy.
He was wanting to know if you're going to be participating in the National Pony Riding Month.
Huh. Well, I'll be writing my Flutter Mac. I mean, hopefully I'd be getting close to finishing that.
Right.
During that time. I would hope. That's a hilarious notion that I think about. It's not going to happen. But I mean, if it's already started, but I mean, I suppose I'll be participating in that way. I doubt they want a sexually explicit story trumpeted on their page, but
right.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think I'll be
officially that stuff.
But I will be writing.
Yes, good stuff. Yeah, so go visit him on femfiction.net. Look up Sleepless Brony. It's all one word, if I remember correctly.
It is.
And speaking of your wonderfully glorious avatar, Futurama just came on TV. And he has the good captain, the good ship captain. Freaking cracks me up, dude. Every time I see your avatar, I just die laughing. I'm just like, this guy.
I mostly didn't want to do a voice interview at first because I didn't want people to stop reading my stuff in Zach Brannigan's voice. So the illusion is shattered now.
Give said coordinates to Leela. Oh yeah.
Oh man, descent into chaos. But yep, definitely. So, do you have any other websites or anything you have accounts on, or ways people can follow you or keep in contact, or any sort of things like that?
People can always hit me up on Gmail. It's just sleeplessbrony@gmail.com. That's it's good old email. I'm on FimFiction. I'm on the explicit Pony Fiction Archive. I'm on. I have a thread on FinCon. I mean, I know FinCon is a happening place with posts happening every few seconds, but I do have a thread there.
Right.
That's where I met everybody else.
There you go.
FinCon.
It's a solid old place.
Yep.
Oh man. Yep. Well, I will definitely email, and as well as maybe try and send you a FimFiction message. I know I love their new banner now that says 502.
It's
and sometimes servicing fiction because of how completely fucked up the website had been for a few weeks. But I think it's mostly in order now. I haven't had any glitches recently, so. But yeah. So all right. Well, thanks again for being on with us, and had a great time. I hope you had a good time too. So good talking to you.
Had a great time, Shem. Thank you guys both so much for having me on. It was a great experience.
No problem. No problem. Thanks again for coming on, and thanks again for writing the story. And this great story. Recommend it to everyone. Again, Romance Reports, and he's also writing other stuff, and that prequel as well as the Fluttermax stuff is being written as we speak in his brain, in his mind, in this moment. So, all right. Well, that's been the interview here with your host, DJ Shamrock, live on Celestia Radio with Sleepless Brony, writer of Romance Reports, and this recording will go up on YouTube at some point. 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 At some point.